Hi, my friends. Arlo with you. Today we have a terribly interesting story about a night watchman in the wilds of Florida who encountered something breathtaking. So make some tea or coffee, cook some food. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. I would be very pleased. So let's go. I'm on night watch duty at a wildlife sanctuary tucked deep in the Florida Everglades. I've spent my entire life in Southwest Florida, a place where urban sprawl meets untamed wilderness. The region is a blend of extremes: opulent estates side by side with decrepit bungalows, pristine beachfronts a stone's throw from the dense, mosquito-ridden swamp. It's the kind of place that keeps you grounded, if only because the disparities hit you in the face as soon as you step out your door. Drive through certain parts of Naples, and you'll see wealth so staggering it's almost alien. Yet, despite all that money, unless you're a mixology wizard, the wealth barely trickles down. Especially during September, when hurricane season quiets the streets. A few months back, when the market tanked and my main gig started bleeding hours, I decided it was time for a second job. That's how I ended up lugging my PA system into a bar that looked like it couldn't decide what it wanted to be when it grew up. A black A-frame sign out front read, "Isaiah Combs 8 to 10 live." The street outside bustled, but this place was eerily barren. As I stepped inside, I took in the contrast. A marble bar top and whitewashed walls clashed with tacky metal signs that screamed, "If beer isn't the answer, you're asking the wrong question." It felt like someone had initially envisioned a sleek, upscale watering hole, but then panicked and added a dartboard and pool table to make it bar-like. The bartender's eyes met mine, and his expression said he didn't want to be here any more than I did. Late 20s, dressed in a black button-down and tie, he looked as out of place as I felt in my polo. "Can I help you?" he asked, his accent vaguely European, though I couldn't place it. "Yeah, I'm Isaiah. I'm playing here tonight." Liza didn't say where she wanted me to set up. He nodded toward a vacant patch of linoleum near the vintage wine cabinet. I dragged my gear over, noticing a grimy black residue marking where a runner rug had once been taped down. Whoever had removed it clearly didn't think to scrub the floor before years of traffic turned the leftover adhesive into a permanent fixture. The whole place gave off the vibe of being hastily patched together, with no one caring enough to do things right. I wasn't feeling much love for the bar or the city at this point. Take your pick. I set up quickly, helped along by the absence of the usual drunks who'd soon be heckling me with cries of "Free bird!" There was no one here except me and the bartender, who told me his name, though I couldn't make sense of the garbled sound he offered. For an hour I played to an audience of no one. Eventually, an elderly man shuffled in, used the restroom, and left without a word. My tip jar remained depressingly empty. As I strummed and shifted chords, the callous skin on my fingers flaked off like dead leaves. By the time 10 p.m. crawled closer, there was only one regular at the far end of the bar, nursing his drink in total silence. I decided to switch things up and rigged my harmonica for a rendition of Seminole Wind. The song brought back memories of my dad taking me on swamp expeditions as a kid. He'd regale me with stories about the skunk ape, Florida's answer to Bigfoot, and I ate it up. Our outings were epic. Bologna sandwiches packed alongside flashlights, fishing gear, and bug spray potent enough to melt plastic. We'd pile into our beat-up Saturn Vue and hit Alligator Alley at dawn, golden light flickering through the trees like strobes. We never found any trace of the mythical beast, but those days were magic. Even now, part of me hopes creatures like the skunk ape are out there, though I know it's probably just nature we haven't fully cataloged yet. Nothing supernatural. My phone buzzed, jolting me back to the present. It was Harvey, the guy who'd hooked me up with this gig. Harvey had recently been upgraded from casual acquaintance to good friend, though his personality could be a lot to handle. "Yo, big dog," he greeted me. "How's the hideout? Making bank?" "Not exactly," I replied, leaning against the wall between the out-of-order restrooms. "There's one dude here, and he's been staring at his beer like it owes him money. Man, that sucks. Not surprised, though. I don't like Liza. Total bitch vibes." "I dunno," I muttered, glancing toward the regular, wondering if he'd end up in the wrong restroom too. Harvey's tone shifted, suddenly more serious. "Oh, hey, before I forget, you still looking for something steady?" "Always. What's up?" "Okay, so my uncle's friend or whatever runs this wildlife sanctuary. Middle of nowhere, real chill. He needs an extra hand." "Doing what?" "Bro, it's cake. Mostly security stuff, watch the place, move heavy crap if needed. Easy money." "This place is just out in the woods?"
Yeah, man.
"Way out in Fakahatchee or Picayune. There's no one for miles. You'll just be on the radio like, there's a bear. Over." "Easy." At that moment, the regular at the bar erupted into a coughing fit. The bartender didn't even glance up, too engrossed in whatever he was watching on his AirPods. It wasn't glamorous, but the sanctuary gig sounded like an upgrade from this dive. I made a mental note to follow up with Harvey. Maybe a quiet job in the middle of nowhere was exactly what I needed. "Harvey, text me your uncle's cousin's roommate's number, will you?" Type shit. "And let me know if Liza gives you trouble tonight. She stiffed me last week." On Monday afternoon, I set out for the Gore Research Center. This place was way out in the sticks. Florida's funny that way. It's like a microcosm of the entire U.S., only compressed and turned up to 11. Most of the population and money cling to the coasts, but drive 25 minutes inland, and you might as well be in rural Louisiana. My neighborhood? 10 minutes from one of the Bidens. 20 minutes from there. My dad once found an overturned skiff hiding a bale of marijuana. Who knew we'd came in bales? Pro tip: don't try to cut into one thinking you can just grab a little. Those things are packed tighter than a bank vault. They had prison crews cleaning up the mess for days. I'd been on the road for about half an hour to meet the woman running the facility. My sedan wasn't exactly built for this trek, but luck was on my side. It hadn't rained in days, which was rare for this time of year. I turned off Golden Gate Parkway and plunged into the depths of the Picayune Strand State Forest. Traffic thinned, and the roads deteriorated with each passing mile. Homes became fewer and increasingly dilapidated. American flags gave way to Trump flags, which gave way to rebel flags, which eventually gave way to nothing but trees. A sign loomed ahead: "End county maintenance." Thud. My car jolted as the pavement gave way to a cruel mix of limestone, sand, and dirt. A plume of dust billowed in my wake, and my vehicle rattled like it was auditioning for a demolition derby. The remaining stretch of the journey was mostly unpaved, winding through a labyrinth of dirt roads. RVs sat ominously in clearings, their purpose unclear. Strange wooden structures clung to the trees like something out of a survivalist's fever dream. Around 130th Avenue, I passed a deer carcass baking in the sun. At last, I reached the gate 2 hours before sunset. My battle-worn Hyundai idled, caked in mud and grime, as I waited for it to open. I checked my phone. The message I'd sent to the contact wasn't delivered. Somehow, I still had a single bar of LTE, which honestly felt miraculous. I fired off another text to let her know I'd arrived. While I waited, I took in my surroundings. A trio of signs hung on a post. "No trespassers, keep out." "Anaethloriendum Wildlife Sanctuary. Be not overmuch wicked, neither be thou foolish. Why shouldest thou die before thy time?" Ecclesiastes 7 verse 17. Moments later, the gate roared to life. The house beyond it looked like something straight out of Swiss Family Robinson. Towering live oaks, cypress, and ficus trees enveloped the structure. The driveway, overgrown and winding, led to a staircase wrapped in the choking embrace of a strangler figure. Jasmine vines crept along the banister, their wilted blossoms scattered like confetti. Spanish moss draped the trees, casting the house in a shrouded, otherworldly glow. My eyes drifted to an observation deck perched on what appeared to be the 3rd floor. It felt as if the wilderness was reclaiming this place, one leaf and vine at a time. She emerged from the front door, a woman in her early 60s with jet black hair just beginning to gray at the roots. "Isaiah, so good to see you," she called out, her voice carrying across the distance with surprising strength. Matching her energy, I replied, "Deb, nice to finally meet in person." Eager to assert some semblance of control in this unfamiliar setting, I quickly scaled the worn staircase, hand outstretched in greeting. My overenthusiasm felt borderline inappropriate, but I couldn't stop myself. The breeze against my palm reminded me I was sweating. A lot. "Come on in, son. Let's get you settled," Deb said, motioning me inside. The interior was immaculate. Calling it a house didn't feel quite right. It lacked the lived-in touches of a home. There was no TV, no kitchen appliances beyond a lone coffee maker perched on a welcome desk. Above the desk hung a portrait of an elderly, white-haired man with a golden retriever, both smiling from the front steps of this very staircase, back before the strangler fig took over. Deb tossed her jean jacket onto a coat rack by the door, clasped her hands together, and rocked on her heels. "Well, welcome to the Education Center. This was Dr. Bob's home before we converted it. We do tours, craft days, and occasionally field trips. Well, not so much field trips anymore. It's a bit far and obscure. Schools aren't keen on the, negative connotations. But that doesn't stop the great work we're doing." Her eyes lit up as she spoke, her enthusiasm infectious. "So, this is a conservation collier restoration site," Deb began, leading me further into the house. "Basically, we're working to return this area to its natural habitat. It's a hardwood cypress swamp forest." Hardwood, cypress, swamp, forest. She chuckled at her own stumbling attempt to label the place. "While being part of the Picayune Strand, we're also smack dab in the middle of Big Cypress's critical area of state concern." As we moved through the house, she gestured to photographs and old newspapers lining the walls, captioned museum style. "We work to raise awareness, and of course we've got boots on the ground here," she said, spinning to face me. "During the day," she turned back and continued, "we document tree growth, panther populations, water quality, you name it. The further people are from these vital environments, the more they tend to do well. Flourish." We crossed a corridor sealed off by a red velvet rope and two once golden posts now tarnished green. I peered inside and spotted one of those wheeled stepladders you'd see in old libraries. Straightening up, I quipped, "Keep Florida wild." "Exactly. Yes, that's so good. I like that," she replied, beaming. I felt a pang of guilt. I just parroted an Instagram caption I'd seen. We stood in silence for a beat, my smile and nod doing the heavy lifting. "OH!" Deb exclaimed, clapping her hands together. "W9 and paperwork. I'll drop them off in the morning. For now, let me show you around." She spun on her heel and led me toward the front door. "This was Robert's entertaining area," she said, motioning around the room. "He was a bit of a curmudgeon, so it's not like he had many guests." As we approached the reception desk, my eyes caught a word etched above the door. Nathlorendum. Curious, I pulled out my phone to Google it, but Deb interrupted before I could type a single letter. "Most of what you'll need is in here or under the desk, including a charger," she said, handing me a lightning cable. "Thanks," I muttered. "Absolutely. Now follow me upstairs. I'll show you the exhibits." Grabbing the staircase rail, she knocked on it 3 times before ascending. As we climbed, the building's age revealed itself. The air grew still, tinged with the nostalgic scent of mildew. At the top of the stairs, Deb reached for a brittle, yellowed light switch. "Click," she said as the overhead fluorescents sputtered to life with a groan, casting their dim glow over a strange menagerie. Taxidermied animals lined the walls. A bear, wild boar, a buck and a doe, a bald eagle, gopher tortoises and otters. A nearly 6-foot-long tarpon dominated one wall. Deb pointed to the eagle. "Don't worry, that's incredibly old," she assured me, mistaking my bewilderment for concern. She launched into an explanation of the exhibits, but my attention was split between her words and my attempt to mentally catalog the room. Further along, I noticed a plain wooden door adorned with the painted silhouette of a wild hog. I approached it curiously. "That's the pig room," Deb said. Instinctively, I almost blurted out, "The fuck?" but managed to hold my tongue. Instead, I asked, "Pardon, the pig room," she repeated with a knowing smile. "Is that exactly what you think it is?" "Yes." Well, thanks for clearing that up, Deb. I had no clue what she meant. Reading my confusion, she swung the door open and stepped inside. Frankly, there was no other name for it. The dimly lit room housed a man's lifelong obsession. Glass cases displayed dioramas, jars, and diagrams. Notes, sketches, and photographs covered the walls. A paddock wood bookcase was crammed with jars of fetal pigs suspended in formaldehyde. Shelves held titles like the Merck Veterinary Manual and the Embryology of the Pig, alongside crates overflowing with boar tusks. One wall was dominated by a photocopy of a textbook diagram showing a curled embryo that looked more manatee than pig. At the center of the room stood a stainless steel table, slightly tilted toward a drain on the far wall. A small trough completed the unsettling scene. The table was lined with an array of tools: scalpels, a bone saw, and several other instruments whose purposes I couldn't even begin to guess. On the far side of the room stood an intricately arranged display: thin slices of a pig, preserved under glass. There were 6 in total, each revealing a different section of the body. One showcased white cartilage surrounded by meat from the snout. Another revealed a cavity containing a perfectly round white structure. The organs and bones were frozen in place, seemingly caught in a timeless stasis, as though some strange, four-dimensional force had ensnared the hog in an eternal moment. I ran my hand along the trough of the operating table, its cool metal surface scarred with the scratches and wear of countless procedures. Turning my head, I caught sight of the cages. 8 of them, standing empty but exuding a forlorn air. Dusty hay and straw, stained and brittle with age, lay scattered across the floors of the narrow cells, each barely 2.5 feet wide and 5 feet deep. The room was eerily devoid of any distinct scent. Bob really took his research seriously, I said aloud. No kidding, Deb replied with a huff. You don't exactly find pig slices like these on Amazon. But seriously, the strides he made in veterinary medicine are incredible. I scanned the shelves, which were filled with textbooks and a macabre assortment of supplies. This isn't quite what I was expecting, I admitted. Deb shrugged as she tapped the doorframe 3 times before heading toward the stairs. Let's move on to the next floor. After the tour concluded, I followed her out to the driveway. I'll be back tomorrow morning around 8 to get your report on the night shift, she said. Not that there's usually much to report, as you'd probably expect. If you get bored, there's some filing to do in Bob's downstairs study. Oh, and I think there's a crudité platter in the break room fridge if you're hungry. Thanks, Deb. I appreciate the opportunity. Absolutely, Isaiah. Just don't let the isolation get to you, she said with a knowing grin before spinning her keys and unlocking her Jeep with a quick triple click. She climbed into her dark green Wrangler and drove off, a cloud of dust trailing behind her. I stood there, watching her car grow smaller as it turned off DeSoto and back toward civilization. The sound of the engine faded, leaving behind nothing but silence. I turned right onto 40th Avenue, soon spotting a small sign ahead. Dr. Robert H. Gore 3 Preserve. Perfect, I muttered, feeling a smile tug at my lips. Gravel crunched under my sneakers as I jogged lightly toward the trailhead. Twilight was setting in as I passed the sign marking the 2-mile loop. The forest greeted me with the faint call of an osprey overhead and the gentle rustling of leaves swayed by the breeze. Aside from the occasional crack of a branch or the snap of a twig, the woods were quiet, a calm I hadn't realized I'd missed. I started a hike on my Apple Watch, figuring a walk would help stretch my legs after the bumpy ride and give my mind some clarity after my interview with Deb. What did she mean by "don't let the isolation get to you"? Her words lingered in my mind like a bad aftertaste. At some point, I realized I hadn't been paying much attention to my surroundings. To my right, a mossy oak intertwined with a sable palm, the two locked in a silent struggle for space amidst the vegetation. To my left, old Florida pines stood in varying states, some full of life, others decaying and riddled with woodpecker holes. Ahead, the path narrowed, obstructed by fallen palms. Behind me, the daylight was slipping away fast, quickened my pace. The trail, once well-maintained, grew treacherous as it transitioned to uneven ground littered with rocks, roots, and hidden dips masked by tall grass. Every sound, the chirp of a bird, the flutter of wings, felt magnified. A stray branch whipped against my arm, leaving a shallow scratch that stung in the cooling air. Overhead, the waning light cast shadows of birds that loomed like mythical thunderbirds, their wingspans stretching in jagged silhouettes. The branches above seemed to twist and reach, as though nature itself were trying to snare me. I reached for my phone, only to realize with a jolt of panic that I'd left it on the desk back at the house. No flashlight. I froze, the cold air filling my lungs, the pit in my throat sinking deep into my chest. My decision-making faltered, but I forced myself to move, picking up my pace once more. I've hiked at night before, on familiar trails no more than 700 feet long, ones I could navigate with my eyes closed. But here, in unknown territory and technically on the clock, I'd wandered much farther than I'd planned. Still, I wasn't lost. The loop was a circle. There was only one way in and the same way out. At least that's what I thought. When I rounded the next bend, I was met not with a continuation of the trail but a wall of dense vegetation and tightly packed palmettos. A dead end. I wasn't lost, I told myself again. I just needed to turn around and retrace my steps. By now, the sky had turned a deep, featureless black. I broke into a run, ignoring the roots and rocks beneath my feet. Palmetto branches grazed my arms, and my own labored breathing drowned out the sound of my hurried footfalls. Then my left foot caught under a root, and the world tilted. I hit the ground hard, the forest floor stealing every ounce of air from my lungs. My left hand scraped against dirt and leaves, while my right palm slid across a moss-covered stone. For a brief moment, I thought about laughing at the ridiculousness of it all, until I heard it. The sound of footsteps. They hadn't stopped when I fell. Call it delirium or adrenaline, but as I tumbled to the ground, I could have sworn the sound of footsteps kept pace with mine, even after I fell. My cheek pressed against the dirt, my vision useless in the encroaching darkness. I became hyper-aware of my surroundings. And yet I heard nothing. No birds, no rustling in the underbrush, no telltale snap of twigs underfoot, just the faint whisper of a breeze weaving through the palmetto fronds. Then, for a fleeting moment, the air turned acrid, a nauseating blend of ammonia, urine, and the sickly sweetness of rotting fruit. As the ache in my body began to register, another sensation crept over me, an unshakable feeling of being watched. It was as though countless unseen eyes had fixated on my crumpled form, their collective gaze heavy and unrelenting. I froze, fear locking me in place. The old wilderness saying echoed in my mind, "If it's black, fight back. If it's brown, lie down." But there aren't brown bears in Florida, at least none that I'd ever heard of. That left one option: fight back. Though lying on the ground already didn't inspire much confidence in my chances. Forward was my only escape. If something was out there, it was behind me, and I wasn't about to wait around to find out what it was. Then I heard it. Plink. What the hell was that? The thought struck fast and sharp, but I didn't dare speak. Plink. This time, the sound was closer 3, maybe 4 feet away. Plink. I stiffened as the silence was broken again. This time a rock landing right in front of me. A small, unassuming pebble. But my gut told me it hadn't simply rolled there on its own. Plink. Another one flew past my head. And that was enough. Pain forgotten, I planted my hands against the limestone and dirt, forcing myself upright in a single jerky motion. My eyes darted behind me, scanning the shadows. Nothing. No way was I staying to wait for whatever or whoever was out there. My body moved before my brain could catch up. I bolted, adrenaline coursing through my veins as my feet pounded against the uneven ground. The trail stretched before me, the rocks and roots thinning out as I went, but each step sent fresh jolts of pain through my legs. My shredded sneakers bit into my heels, tearing at my skin, while my lungs burned with every desperate breath. Worse still, I wasn't alone. The footsteps were back. More than just mine now, they followed, closing in. Instinct overtook reason, and I ran faster than I ever thought possible, my surroundings blurring into shadow and motion. I was no longer a person, I was prey. By the time I burst out of the trailhead and onto the road, I was on the verge of collapse. My heart thundered in my chest as I glanced over my shoulder. The shadows remained within the trees, lingering at the edge of the trail, as though whatever had followed me dared not cross into the open. I didn't stop to question it. My legs carried me back to the house, Nathlorendum as Deb called it, up the choked staircase and through the door. I slammed it shut behind me, the sound reverberating through the quiet interior. For a moment, I stood frozen, leaning against the door as my mind scrambled to process what had just happened. Eventually, gravity took over, and I slid to the floor, sitting there with my knees pulled up as I tried to catch my breath. The silence of the house was oppressive, magnified by my racing thoughts. Little by little, reason crept back in, trying to soothe my frayed nerves with denial. The air was unnaturally still and cold, and something nagged at the back of my mind. Deb hadn't mentioned air conditioning. How did a house in the middle of Florida stay so frigid without it? Shoving the thought aside, I dragged myself to the downstairs bathroom to inspect the damage. My palms were raw and tender but otherwise fine. Dirt and leaves clung to my clothes, and deep scratches marred my left cheek. I looked like hell, but it could have been worse. I turned on the sink, letting the cool water run as I peeled off my left sneaker, wincing at the sight. My big toe was an angry shade of purple. I'd never broken a toe before, but it didn't take a doctor to know it wasn't supposed to look like that. Lifting my head, I met my own reflection in the mirror. Dark circles framed my eyes, my face pale and streaked with grime. What the hell was that? I muttered, my voice hoarse and shaky. Folding a sheet of toilet paper, I dabbed it in water and pressed it against the cuts on my cheek, the sting a sharp reminder of how real it all was. Was there anything there at all? A small, treacherous voice whispered from the back of my mind. No, I said firmly, trying to shut it out. No, I know what I saw. The voice pushed back. What did you see? I couldn't answer. I hadn't seen anything, but I knew what I'd heard. But what did you hear? Footsteps. The rock. Could explain it all rationally? The forest was dark. Adrenaline coursed through my veins, and my mind could have been playing tricks on me. Maybe it was a coyote or, less comfortingly, a panther. Logical explanations existed, but they felt like acrobatics, twisting, turning, and stretching my thoughts too far. My brain, already stiff and sluggish, wasn't in the mood for a mental workout. I considered going out to my car to grab my guitar, something to refocus my mind. But the odds of me venturing back out there tonight were about the same as finding a winning lottery ticket in a haystack while being struck by lightning in a frozen-over hell. No chance. Instead, I collapsed onto the couch in front of the massive limestone fireplace. My eyes begged for rest, and every blink grew heavier than the last. The weight of the day's events seeped from my heart to my eyelids, and before I knew it, I was out. For all of 5 minutes. An hour later, I was wandering the interior of my new workplace. If the so-called pig room was any indication, there had to be more to this place than met the eye. Dr. Gore's study revealed a few of his published works, but none were related to pigs. Aside from the grotesque display above my head, the house seemed ordinary enough. A tiny museum tucked into the middle of nowhere, a shrine to one man's eccentric passions. But why? Why preserve this place, deep in the sticks, 20 miles east of nowhere? What was the point? These questions spiraled through my mind until one thought forced its way to the front, demanding my full attention. Why am I here? Sure, tonight's pay would cover my health insurance for the month, and tomorrow's shift would pay for a week's worth of meal kits. But beyond my personal reasons, what was the purpose of having anyone here? What exactly was I keeping an eye on? And what was I supposed to protect it from? Deb's parting words resurfaced in my mind like a bad omen. Don't let the isolation get to you. At the time, they'd seemed harmless enough, but now they felt like a warning. I'd let the isolation get to me already. Limping up the stairs with a bruised foot and a face full of scratches, I knew I was unraveling. Paranoia gnawed at the edges of my sanity. If I didn't pull myself together, I wouldn't last the night. Plink. My blood turned to ice. My peripheral vision narrowed as my temples throbbed like a timpani drum, each beat slowing to an unbearable crawl. I stood frozen, listening, waiting for the next sound. 5 excruciatingly slow minutes passed. Surrounded by glass in the cupola, I had an unobstructed view of the darkness beyond. The Spanish moss hung lifelessly in the night, shrouded in the shadows of heavy clouds that had smothered the moon and stars. The wind howled through the trees, rising to a deafening crescendo. Then, plink. I saw it this time. Pebble struck the glass in front of me. My heart thundered as I staggered back, suddenly hyper-aware of the fishbowl I trapped myself in. With every nerve screaming at me to flee, I turned and made my way down the stairs, careful not to trip in my panicked haste. The soulless gaze of the taxidermy bear on the second floor pierced through the dim light, its glassy eyes following me as I passed. I avoided the animals, their lifelike forms suddenly unnerving. Downstairs, the air was colder, a biting draft that raised goosebumps along my arms. I rounded the welcome desk and grabbed my phone from the charger, only to find it had dropped to 20%. The damn thing hadn't charged at all. The wind outside roared louder, rattling the windows. My hand brushed against the desk, where a faded newspaper clipping caught my eye. The yellowed paper read, December 19, 2000. Homeowner shoots at alleged trespasser's vehicle. 1 teen dead. A rattling noise drew my attention to the back of the house. I tried to convince myself it was just a branch scraping against hurricane shutters. But as I crept toward the source of the sound, my stomach churned. The window was open. The wind rushed through the house, carrying with it the unmistakable stench of ammonia, rotting fruit, eggs, and urine. My breath caught in my throat. I wasn't alone. A clattering noise came from upstairs, something knocking against one of the taxidermy displays. My suspicions snapped into a chilling certainty. It had found me. I don't care how much I'm getting paid. I'm not staying here another minute, I muttered, grabbing my car keys and heading out. My tires kicked up dust as I sped down the driveway, the oppressive woods swallowing the house behind me. Once on DeSoto, I fumbled for my phone, trying to send a message to Deb. Shit went down tonight. I don't know WTF is going on up here, but I want no part of it. Front gate closed, door locked, key under the mat. If you knew what I was getting into, I'm very disappointed. The message failed to send. No service. I tried again, this time texting Harvey. Hey bro, who the hell told you about this gig at the nature center? There's some crazy shit up here. No bars. The isolation that had started as an ominous whisper now roared in my ears. I kept driving, the forest closing in on either side as I fled toward what little civilization lay beyond the shadows. The Hyundai's high beams carved a blinding white tunnel through the towering pines, casting sharp shadows that danced along the dirt road. Mud and dust splattered against the car's battered exterior, each impact adding to the evidence of a rough night. The road was deserted, yet I held a steady 35 miles an hour. No way was I slowing down out here. Behind me, the crimson glow of my taillights briefly illuminated a figure darting across the road. My breath caught. A child. At 2 in the morning, on a desolate back road deep in an old Florida state forest, a child no taller than 4 feet had just sprinted behind my car, narrowly avoiding disaster. Under normal circumstances, I might have stopped. But the woods weren't going to fool me. Not tonight. They'd lured me this far, but nothing would make me stop now. The rain, however, had other plans. Florida's Januaries rarely see more than a day of rainfall, but tonight was an exception. The skies had given way, unleashing a torrential downpour that drenched the car, the trees, and most dangerously, the dirt road. Water carved grooves into the softened loam, transforming the rough terrain into a treacherous slurry. My tires skidded and cut through the muck, each turn threatening to yank the wheel from my grip. As I gripped the steering wheel tighter, something in the rearview mirror caught my eye. The child was chasing my car. Its silhouette sprinted through the storm, moving impossibly fast as it splashed through the wake of water and mud thrown by my tires. My pulse surged. Hands fumbling, I threw the car into sport mode and slammed the gas pedal to the floor. The Hyundai lurched forward, the sudden acceleration sending loose items sliding into the back seat. The road became a blur of bumps and potholes, each jolt launching me briefly into the air before gravity slammed me back down. I dared another glance in the mirror. The figure was on all fours now, its limbs churning through the muck with inhuman speed. Mud clung to its appendages, but it didn't falter. Its head hung low, pointed toward the ground, while its limbs moved with an unsettling ferocity. It was gaining on me. Panic clawed at my chest as I sped past the skeletal remains of a deer sprawled on the shoulder of 130th. My grip on the steering wheel tightened to the point of pain as the car began to lose traction. The wheels slipped. The Hyundai hydroplaned, spinning wildly out of control. My heart leaped into my throat as the car veered off the road, narrowly missing a pine tree before skidding into an open field. The world blurred as I spun in helpless circles, the tires carving chaotic patterns into the soggy earth. Finally, the brakes caught, and the car groaned to a stop. For a moment, there was only the sound of rain pattering on the roof, a dull and steady drone that filled the silence. My wrist vibrated, a notification from my watch, coldly informing me that I'd been in an accident. Fire crawled up my spine, radiating through my body as I sat frozen, trying to focus on something other than the churn of nausea in my gut. I couldn't find my phone. My fingers trembled as I cut the engine. "I'll just stay here a little while," I muttered to no one. Breathing deeply, I worked the tension from my hands. In out. Slowly, I leaned my head back against the seat, my crown pressing into the headrest. The metallic taste of blood seeped onto my tongue, pooling at the back of my mouth. My stomach churned. Plink. I flinched. Plink, plink. The sound was deliberate, precise. My hands scrambled for the ignition as dread coiled in my chest. Click, click, click. I pumped the brake pedal and turned the key harder. Click, click, click. Again. Click, click, click. Another plink. This one struck dead center on the windshield. My breath hitched as I raised my eyes, catching a glimpse of something darting out of my periphery. The rain had slowed to a light drizzle, and for the first time, I could hear it. Footsteps. Quick, scattered movements encircling the car. Something or someone was out there. Wham! The impact rattled my passenger door, followed by a thunderous series of thuds. Something scurried over the roof, its weight reverberating through the car's frame. Before I could process the noise, it leaped onto the hood and crouched there, staring directly at me. "What the fuck is that?" The words twisted into a garbled whisper, snagged in my throat. The thing had the general shape of a child, but its rain-slick fur gleamed a mottled brown under the faint moonlight. Beady black eyes darted between me and the interior of the car, sizing me up. Its little chest rose and fell rapidly as cleft. Four-fingered hands smeared streaks of mud across my windshield. It pressed a gnarled snout against the glass, where sickly green and gray mucus bubbled from its gaping nostrils. Instinct took over. I slammed my fist on the horn, the sound exploding into the night. The thing squealed, a high-pitched noise that was equal parts fear and rage. It reared back, its tiny tusks scraping the windshield, leaving jagged cracks as it flailed. Then, with one final screech, it launched itself off the hood and disappeared into the inky black. I fumbled to start the car. The engine sputtered weakly, my headlights flickering just enough to catch a glimpse of the creature retreating into the distance. My chest heaved as I reached for the ignition again, but a new sound froze me in place. Grunts, high-pitched squeals. A symphony of guttural noises erupted from the tree-line, growing louder with each second. The shadows shifted, and figures emerged, dozens of them. They weren't all the same. Some had scraggly fur, while others were sickly pale. Their sizes ranged from small, juvenile shapes to hulking, broad-shouldered beasts. Each bore the same soulless black eyes and curved tusks of varying lengths. Their cleft hands flexed and twitched as they shuffled forward, snorting and squealing in unison. I flooded the engine in panic. Come on. Work! Damn it! I shouted, violently shaking the steering wheel. A fist slammed against the dashboard in desperation. Please, for the love of God. The car lazily sputtered to life just as the first two creatures rammed into it. One slammed against the driver's side window with such force that it left a bloody snout print smeared across the glass. It staggered back, confused, its hoof-like hand reaching up to touch the wound. I watched in horror as it began to lick its own blood, hungrily lapping at the red streaks on its fur. A larger creature approached, its massive snout twitching as it examined the injured one. Without warning, it slashed its tusks across the smaller hog's throat, then plunged its mouth into the fresh wound. The others swarmed instantly, squealing with glee as they tore into the carcass. Flesh and sinew were ripped apart with cleft hands and gnashing teeth, blood spraying as they devoured their own. 15 or more creatures piled on top of the body, their twisted forms writhing as they fed just inches from my door. I gripped the wheel tighter, trembling. The car still wasn't moving, and the gruesome scene left me with no doubt. I was next. My shaking hand darted to the glove box, grabbing a clump of old McDonald's napkins. I spat the blood pooling in my mouth onto the paper, then cracked the window just enough to wedge the bloody napkins in place. Rolling it back up, I prayed the distraction would work. A smaller creature, left out of the frenzy, caught the scent. Its snout twitched violently before it unleashed a guttural scream. One by one, the feeding stopped. The remaining hogs turned their heads toward me, abandoning the mangled body to focus on the lone, trapped target in the car. Their snorts turned into low growls as they shuffled closer, surrounding the vehicle. The first push sent the car rocking. The second had it teetering. Then, with a roar, the Hyundai surged forward, its wheels finally finding enough traction to break free from the mud. The car jolted onto the dirt road as I punched the accelerator, mud and blood spraying behind me. The creatures pursued, galloping on all fours through the slurry with unnatural speed. Their squeals filled the air as they closed the distance. I rolled the window down just enough to let the napkins flutter free. The bloody bait spiraled back into the darkness, landing in the midst of the pack. The hogs stopped. Their focus shifted, and I watched in the rearview mirror as they turned on the napkins, snarling and snapping at one another in a frenzy. The monstrous shapes faded from view as the dim red glow of my taillights gave way to black. The bumps in the road became less frequent, a sure sign I was nearing civilization. Relief flooded me as the familiar smoothness of asphalt replaced the churned mud. I'd made it back to the county-maintained road. Minutes later, I pulled into the Waffle House off exit 101. I ignored the dents, the blood, the mud caked onto every inch of the car. Grabbing my iPad from my guitar case, I headed inside, ordered eggs and sausage, and began to write. The sun was rising now, its warm glow breaking through the events of the night. The waitress kept throwing me odd glances, her eyes darting toward the door as though expecting someone, or something, to follow me. Just as I was about to pay, I heard it. Plink. A single pebble struck the restaurant window. Oh, what a fascinating story. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you liked it. See you soon.